Welcome to the Mitch Henck Show, originating for blacks from Wisconsin's capital. Mitch is the radio voice of uncommon sense. All sides of an argument are welcome here. Just be prepared to make one, as Mitch argues for truth, not victory. Politics, lifestyle, pop culture are all on the table. So get ready to participate on the Mitch Henck Show.
All right, Roger Ailes, the originator, the creator of Fox News Channel, former Republican operative and speechwriter and so forth, media consultant for presidents, is 76 and he's stepping down and he's accused of sexual harassment by Sarah Carlson. Gretchen. And one of his anchors, female. And other women have said he's wonderful and hasn't done it to them, but then certain women have not spoken about it, including Megyn Kelly, apparently. So they give him a $60 million severance package. He's leaving, which doesn't prove guilt. He's protesting his innocence, of course, but he's 76. But it raises questions about sexual harassment in the workplace. Dan Russ joins me, who wrote his book, Workplace Poker, and a recent article, Behind Closed Doors, 4 Ugly Truths About Workplace Sexual Abuse Today. Hello, Dan.
Hey, good morning, Mitch.
Good to be with you. Yeah, you hear this Roger Ailes story, and what goes through your mind? It just seems weird to me.
Well, what struck me first was the reactions other people had to the story, because I think for a lot of people, Roger Ailes is a lightning rod. Either very positive or very negative. And I spoke with a fair number of people who have a very positive impression of Roger Ailes. They're Fox News watchers. They're conservative folks. But at the same time, they have a very positive impression of Gretchen Carlson, and she's been very open about her Christian faith, and she's a very pleasant personality. And so when this came out, people didn't know. Wait a minute. What am I supposed to think about this? But it didn't stop them from deciding very quickly what they thought about it, and people came to conclusions really fast regarding whether they believed Roger or Gretchen or whatever. And I think it really tells us a lot about the nature of sexual harassment and abuse in the workplace today, and tells us how difficult the whole thing can be. It still happens. It's different than it was in the 70s or 80s because it's not quite as obvious or overt, because there's been so much sexual harassment training for decades now. Everyone knows what's allowed and not allowed. Everyone knows the rules, so to speak, but human nature hasn't changed. And so when you hear something about, let's say, a Roger Ailes, what I try to do is just step back and not have blind spots related to anybody, and just let the story unfold, because what I know is behind closed doors, stuff happens with people that you'd just be shocked. And it doesn't mean that Roger's guilty.
Yeah. No, but he's 76, first of all. So presumably, I don't know when Gretchen Carlson was making these accusations, but presumably he was in his 60s or beyond when this allegedly took place. So that in itself is kind of surprising, isn't it?
Well, and just to be very real, and you know me, I like to just focus on what's real in the workplace and what's real in life. We live in the age of Viagra, and so what used to be unheard of with a 76-year-old, I got to tell you, it's not unheard of anymore. So
I tell you, what a miracle drug, huh?
Yeah.
But first of all, he's also a person who's got enormous power and is not stupid. I mean, how could it be that dumb? Now, granted, there are powerful men. We saw it with Bill Clinton, who could do things and survive. But there are political ramifications to that as well. But
I talked to a lot of women about their work environment day in and day out. And when I was writing the book, Workplace Poker, I did a lot of interviews. And while the book doesn't focus specifically on sexual harassment, it came out naturally in some of the stories that they told about the rough bosses, difficult situations. And one of the things that was even surprising to me, because I mean, I'm practically a Boy Scout at work. I mean, I am the straightest of straight arrows, and it just would never occur to me to act in that sort of way. But what I came to understand is that it not only still happens, but I think the bottom line is, particularly with men, when they have power, when they feel like there really is no downside, and that's it. Bill Cosby didn't start by drugging actresses. It starts, with much more modest behavior, but as they get away with that, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and the same is true with a Roger Ailes. It doesn't start with sexual harassment. It starts with innuendos. It starts with assuming he's guilty. And so over time, the person with power gets away with more and more and more, and lives in a bubble, never gets held accountable.
No, and you'd be surprised what happens in more rural areas. I mean, of course, this was 20 years ago. My then wife was doing sales at a radio station in Shawano, which is a small place up north in Wisconsin. And these older sales reps, you wouldn't believe what they said to her. I mean, it was barbaric stuff. I mean, if you did it today, you'd be hopefully fired within 5 minutes.
And yet, even today, you have women who will say, I just put up with it. If it goes too far, I'll do something or say something. But mostly, I put up with it because I have to for my career. And I know that's politically incorrect. Oh my God, you're not supposed to say that. But take even the Gretchen Carlson story. She was silent about all of this until Fox News didn't renew her contract. So clearly, if this stuff was happening, she was putting up with it. She was basically saying, "Okay, you know what? I'll go with it, or I'll go with this experience because I want this career. I want this particular job." And apparently, one of the Fox News anchors who was silent about Roger was Megyn Kelly, while all of the other female news anchors stepped forward. They made public statements about their support for Roger, and he'd been perfect with them, and nothing had ever been wrong, and this was just shocking and surprising. And while they didn't overtly throw Gretchen under the bus, the implication was she's either being overly sensitive or she's it was part of her negotiation. There were those implications. But what actually happens in the workplace is these guys, and again, I'm not assuming anything with Roger, but these guys have actually gotten much more clever. Back in the day, you would just have harassment just happening, out in the open in the office, things being said.
Mad Men.
But yeah, today it still happens, but it's not only behind closed doors, but a lot of the harassers are very clever in that they make sure they have other women in the workplace with whom they are perfect, with whom they are totally appropriate. They create covers, and this game, for them, many of them, it is a game, is something that they play very actively. So it's not surprising that 8 women would be shocked to hear that Roger might be doing or saying something behind closed doors that he would never say to them.
Oh, sure. Interesting stuff. Dan Rust, come back with more. And your calls, too. I'm curious, this stuff still goes on, which is, I knew it was the case, but, how widespread. And we don't know if he's guilty. Obviously, I got to keep saying that. But still a lot of conversation pieces here on The Mitch Henck Show.
Welcome back to The Mitch Henck Show. Mitch seeks the truth by inviting all sides of the issue. Thanks for listening to The Mitch Henck Show.
All right. Dan Rust, the book, I actually wrote an article recently, Behind Closed Doors, 4 Ugly Truths about workplace sexual abuse today. His book, Workplace Poker, deals with the politics of work, including the sexual politic. I hear you saying this, and I worked in a very, shall we say, Madison, Wisconsin, politically correct, you'd think enlightened area, the TV station, NBC affiliate, and I'm telling you, Dan, there were so many workers that were dating each other and sleeping with each other, and the boss was sleeping with one of the female anchors, and two of the other anchors were sleeping. I mean, it was just incredible. And I just kind of thought, what the? You know, I was a reporter. I thought, what is this? You know, but it happened. It's rampant.
Yeah, and sometimes, you know, I think sometimes guys like you and I, we wonder, what's going on? Why am I not getting any action? I mean, it's because, you know, I'm completely oblivious until, like, you peel the layers away and you suddenly realize there's a lot of this happening. And not all harassment. There's just a lot of activity.
But do you want to go out with a coworker where you have to do business? I thought that was taboo.
Well, and there was a time where it at least was taboo, although it still happened. But in today's world, where those strictures have been lifted to a large degree, now it's not really considered taboo to date a coworker or to even have a one-night hookup with a coworker, and it makes the whole issue of sexual harassment even more challenging because, well, what's the distinction then? Can you have a hookup with a coworker, but then 2 weeks later he makes an unwanted advance on you, and now is that harassment? And
it gets into a dangerous area, you know. Now, granted, I will confess, full disclosure, at 25, I would go out with the interns, but I mean, they were 22. I mean, no.
Right.
But I mean, at 35, I didn't go out with coworkers. I mean, it's one of those deals.
Well, one of the things I definitely learned when I was writing the book Workplace Poker was that while all of that stuff is confusing, true sexual abuse and harassment in the workplace does still happen. And what I was interested in was finding out how are women reacting today? How are they coping or dealing with it today? And what I found did surprise me because I just assumed that, well, if it happens, if you follow the various trainings that almost every business gives out, you march down to human resources, you file a report, and it gets taken care of. But in fact, many of the women that I talked to said that going to HR as your first step either has hurt them or it's something they avoided because they knew that it could hurt them because they've learned the hard way that HR is there for the business. HR is not your personal advocate. And if you truly have a harassment situation or an abuse situation, the first thing you have to do is find someone qualified to be your advocate, someone who is just in it for you, and that generally means seeking out a legal counsel. Even if it's a free, public legal counsel, it doesn't mean talking to your friends at work. It doesn't mean talking to family. I'm not saying you can't do that, but understand that you need someone who knows what they're talking about, who is your advocate, and you need to do that before even reaching out internally to HR because the moment I've had situations where women have said they've gone to HR expecting confidentiality. They've said, look, something's happened. I don't want my name associated with this, and yet you have to understand, human resources, once you make an allegation, they are bound to do certain things, and your confidentiality is not one of the things they're bound to.
Well, it's just stunning to me that in 2016, somebody could just be blatantly offensive and abusive in that way, and you would still be afraid to go report it, just...
Well, for the most part, it's not the blatant abuse where you've got, hey, 3 people heard him say this, or 4 people saw that. It truly is much more subtle now, and there's almost a grooming that takes place with these true, almost sociopathic harassers, where over time they'll have they'll make circumstances occur, they'll orchestrate things so that they create more and more comfort, and then they make certain. I spoke with a woman a couple of weeks ago who said she'd gone on several business trips with her boss, nothing had ever happened, and then suddenly there was a trip where she started to feel a little uncomfortable, but she wasn't really sure what was going on. But by the time the trip ended, the final night, he made a move that was just blatant, and it was almost an attack, and yet he had laid this groundwork, And he had made sure that he did it in a scenario or a situation where there were no witnesses, there was no trail, there was and when she did go to an attorney, and as he asked her a series of questions, it became clear to her that she had absolutely no way to make this a thing. And it was only later that she came to, I think, an understanding that all of that was very much planned. It wasn't just something that sort of happened willy-nilly. It was part of the plan.
Well, and again, proving something is tough, right? I mean, your word.
Well, one lady said to me, she feels like with all the sexual harassment training that's gone on, not only has it had a positive effect, but the negative effect has been to train these guys in terms of what they, how much more clever they have to be in order to get away with what they ultimately want to get away with. And the other thing that's really surprised me was the degree to which many women experience it and put up with it. Maybe not actual abuse, but pretty horrendous behavior just behind the scenes.
Heavy flirting and innuendo and that kind of thing.
And they push back, and their pushback is ignored. And I had a lady just within the last couple of weeks tell me that just recently she'd walked into work one day and there were photographs that had been put on her chair of male body parts, and she is in a cubicle environment, and she looks up, and there's a guy staring at her and smiling from down the hall, but nothing was said. Of course, she knows who did it, but she can't prove it, and I had the same reaction. That still happens, but apparently it does.
Yeah, indeed. And when do we see the article, Dan, Behind Closed Doors, 4 Ugly Truths About Workplace Sexual Abuse Today?
If you go to workplacepoker.com, you'll see a link to the article and all the other information.
And the book is Workplace Poker by Dan Rust. We thank you so much, Dan.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mitch.
And males can be hit on too, but that's
I wish.
It's a relation, not abused necessarily, but we'll stop talking there. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Dan. Take care. This is the Mitch Henck Show.
It's management sponsored.